Your goals and your dreams are so big and so important. You don't get anything for going to the Olympics. The Olympics are for your love of your country and the pride of yourself. We were going to have everything you could possibly need to be successful. Everything's about getting every little advantage. The next group of women or girls won't take this shit. They'll know, no, we don't have to deal with that. I don't have to be treated like that. I would never tell a survivor you have to talk about it. If you can, I think you should. The thing that made me important and the thing that made me special, I can't even do that anymore. I'm nothing now. I think most people are a lot stronger than they think. I remember telling Adam, I'm worried I'm going to find out I'm not as good as I hoped I was.
Welcome to Success Story. I'm your host, Scott Clary. The Success Story podcast is part of the HubSpot podcast network. Very exciting news. HubSpot's inbound conference is back, which means you got to clear your schedules, mark your calendars, get the sitter, 3 jam-packed days from September 18th through the 20th, live in Boston. You're going to hear inspirational narratives, candid interviews on the highs and lows of incredibly notable figures, business owners, politicians. You're going to learn from successful entrepreneurs like Ryan Reynolds and Serena Williams on how they've reinvented themselves and their businesses to achieve massive success. They're going to gain valuable insights from industry leaders, visionaries on effective strategies for personal and professional growth, and there's so much more. And on top of all that, I'm speaking again. This is my 3rd inbound, so I'll be doing a segment. So if you want to hear from Ryan Reynolds, Serena Williams, or you want to hear from me, go to inbound.com, go see the lineup, and grab your tickets today. I'll see you in Boston. Kara, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. I'm excited to go into this. I'm excited to talk about your entire journey. A lot of great things, a lot of not so great things. So we'll go into everything and just sort of like, I just want to have like the sort of like the raw, unvarnished account of like your life, really, because it's a really interesting story. But you wrote a book. You wrote a book about your life, and I was listening, as I always do, to some podcasts before we jumped on, and I was interested in the fact that you said that you were very nervous about writing this book, and a lot of the stuff that you wrote about and that's happened to you and that you speak about, it's not like it's that recent. Like like there's been some years removed from when a lot of this stuff happened. So talk to me about like why nerves when you're writing a book and putting yourself out there speaking about this kind of topic, especially when people would assume like, okay, so it's happened, it was difficult, but like it's happened in the past, you've moved on. This stuff, I guess, really stays with you.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it too is that there were some details I was going to share in the book. I kind of had this just mindset of I share all or I don't share, because it's kind of lighting a match to that.
It's interesting though, because isn't like your thought process about writing this book and worrying about judgment, I feel like that's the reason why some really shitty behavior does not get brought to light, because of that exact thought process. And people that do not have the influence that you have and do not have the resume that you have. I mean, you even had a little bit of self-doubt about writing this book. Can you imagine somebody who did not have the career that you had trying to speak about people they've dealt with? I mean, there's a lot that's happened to you over your career. Obviously not everybody is involved in like a massive drug scandal, but there's other parts to it. There's parts about like sexual harassment. There's parts about how you're treated as a woman. These are things that are, I think, a little bit more universally applicable. And these are things that, I mean, there's no need to feel shame about this stuff, but I mean, you just intuitively did. And I just want to say before we even start, like, I think it's really admirable that you did put yourself out there. And I just want to say thanks for writing this, because the more people that speak up, especially people that have influence, I mean, the better it is for any woman who's trying to just do their thing, kill it, high performance, pushing boundaries, working in fields that were traditionally dominated by men or whatever, what have you, right? So it's really admirable. But I'm curious, you know, now that you look back and you've written it, what was the outcome? Positive, negative, but not just like I'm sure the public received it well, but like in your personal life, were you surprised by some reactions in a good way, in a bad way?
Yeah, I mean, for myself, it was extremely healing, and which surprised me a little bit. Like, I woke up the morning it came out, and there was a piece on Good Morning America. We had filmed ahead of time. I didn't watch that. I just went for a run. I came back. I was so nervous the night before, but then as the day went on, I just felt so much more at peace. And I think especially over the last year, I've really just felt lighter and lighter. Like I had been carrying around a lot of shame and a lot of just things that I was embarrassed about. And it just has no control over me anymore. Like I kind of put it out there and now it's lost the control. So
Yeah.
I think that surprised me how healing it was. And then I think all of the people that reached out and continue to, who have been in similar situations, like, no, maybe they're not trying to win the Boston Marathon, but something happened at work or something happened at school. And that's been surprising, the numbers of people that have reached out. I think it's been a little hard to hear.
It's scary to think about that.
It's really scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, in the first couple months of the book's publication, I kind of had to stop receiving any sort of communication with people because I was getting really overwhelmed. I even feel bad saying that, but I felt like I was taking on other people's trauma. I'm much more removed from it now, but I was surprised and saddened, to be totally honest, that so many people could relate to this story and the worst parts of this story. But that's, again, as you were saying earlier, that was the whole reason that it had to be in there. I mean, like when I was in the height of my running career, I was on the cover of every running magazine. I was being paid a lot for a runner. I was, the face of running in the newspapers all the time. I looked like I had this perfect life. I was in every advertisement. And yet these things happened to me. And so if they could happen to me, they could happen to anyone. And that was really important to me.
Do you ever wonder, because when you're dealing with, running was your work. So when you're dealing with trauma in a professional environment in your work, performance is never at 100%. And I know that like sports psychology is very real to the tune of, like, I'm sure at the level that you were operating at, you saw teams and athletes always aligning with psychologists to sort of optimize performance. And it means a lot when, like, a team that is not optimized mentally will not perform at the level, regardless of their skill set, as a team that is, or an athlete that is. But when you think back, do you think that your career was even jeopardized to some extent by, like, the shit that you were going through? Like, if you thought, where could I have gone with this if I was basically, like, free of all this stress and all this negativity?
At the time, and even while writing the book, I didn't think about that. I thought I was such a great compartmentalizer. I think it started because my dad died when I was little, and I was really good at putting away anything that hurt and not, like, if it doesn't serve me, then I'm not going to address it. I'm not going to feel it. But I will say that after the book came out, a reporter wrote a story about it and said, it makes me think what she could have done had she not been dealing with all this. And that actually made me a little sad because I had never given myself the grace to consider that, I was in the top program in the world, running for the biggest company in the world, sporting company in the world. And all I ever saw was there were, of course, bad things, but I also had so many opportunities. And so I never thought about it from that perspective. And it did make me feel a little sad. I do think, wow, at the height of my career, at the peak ages of my performance, I was dealing with so much stress on a daily basis. Yeah. And perhaps I could have performed better if I hadn't had all that other stuff going on.
Yeah, no, I just think it's, again, it's important that you put this out there, because you think of the opportunity that, like, an environment like this could rob from somebody that didn't have, like, I mean, it's always interesting how life sets us up, and whether or not it's death of a parent or it's a really hard upbringing, it forces us to be a certain kind of person. And maybe if you didn't have those traumatic events early on in your life, maybe, like, this negative environment would have sidetracked you so much that you actually wouldn't have been able to perform at the level that you performed at. It's everything. It's life is weird. Life is very strange. So,
maybe if I hadn't been shoving aside my emotions since I was a child, I wouldn't have been able to do it in my late 20s and early 30s, but unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, that's a skill set I was really good at.
But you think about, like, now when you put this out into the world, and when you sort of talk about, when you bring it to light, and you think about all the potential opportunities that you're you're allowing for a younger generation who align with the right team, right coach, right environment, especially when they're younger. And you hopefully that, if people act right and understand the duty of care for a young athlete as a coach or as a trainer, or whatever, as a professional, you hope you can enable opportunities opposed to maybe, shed light on a bad organization that could basically destroy someone's entire career if they ever, replicated what happened to you to a younger runner, younger athlete that wasn't as mentally strong. It's just very sad, because you see it a lot with I don't know why you see it so much with athletes and coaches. I don't know. I don't really understand it, but I've heard your story. You hear a lot of stories of trainers, coaches abusing and taking advantage to a degree of young athletes to various degrees. I come from a hockey background. I can't remember the name of the coach, but I think it was Theo Fleury who was abused by a coach or a trainer when he was younger. Maybe I'm getting the athlete wrong, but again, the point is, it happens a lot, which is pretty effed up.
I think, I don't know why either. Obviously, it's something about the dynamic of, your coaches, especially when you are extremely driven you're an extremely driven athlete, because I think that your coach becomes the gatekeeper to your dreams. So, you're willing to sort of sidestep certain things and accept certain things because you're so driven on this dream that you have that you're kind of willing to put up with a lot of things that you absolutely should not. But I don't know why coaches end up in that position. How did they? Who was
the gymnastics coach
he was the Larry Nassar, but he was the therapist. He was the manual.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, he wasn't an actual coach.
But he was he was a really bad guy. He was a very, very, very bad guy. Yeah.
He assaulted hundreds of women, I believe, between the Michigan and being with the U.S. national team. So
yeah.
And again, you think about that case, hundreds of women, and it took so long for him to be called to task.
Right? How, it doesn't make any sense. You have all these women, you have all their parents, all their own support systems, and still, for some reason, nobody wants to throw this guy under the bus, even though he's a piece of shit. And I'm sure people knew for years.
Yeah, but the athletes think, well, everybody else is coming through here. And everybody who's good, everybody who goes on to the Olympics comes through this guy, and they're not saying anything. And I just think, I think these things, he is an extreme example, obviously, but that's how this stuff happens, right? Your goals and your dreams are so big and so important, and you start to compromise on your own personal, I don't even know what the word is, but things that you would allow to happen to yourself because you're well, they're doing it.
It's almost like your morals. It's you compromise on your own morals as a person. It's just disgusting. I want to go through your story first, and we'll get into, so we're sort of fast tracking a little bit because there's a lot of parts to your story. So let's start with where you started. So you were a late bloomer as a runner. So maybe even just give me a synopsis of sort of your upbringing. You just mentioned your dad passed. What prompted you to get into running?
Yeah, so my dad passed away a week before my 4th birthday, and I actually lived on the East Coast. I was born in New York City, and when my dad died, we moved to a totally different cultural city, Duluth, Minnesota. Completely different. Where my mom's parents lived, and it, my sister was 6, I was 4, and then I had a 6-week-old sister. So my mom was just needed help. So we moved in with her parents for a little bit, got a house in Duluth, and I grew up in Duluth. And my grandpa was a lifelong runner. What's super interesting to me is that he wasn't a racer. He wasn't a competitive runner. He ran before saying running was for mental health or exercise helped your mental health. Before that was a thing that anyone would say. He ran, and he used to tell me, I just feel so much better. I just feel so much calmer. So anyway, he took me, I was a very shy child, and he took me to my first race. And he loved to tell this story of all these kids line up. It's a mile race, and some of them have their parents running with them. And I had my grandpa, and they shoot the starter gun, and I just fall so hard. And I get up, and he can see that I'm bleeding bad from my knees. And he thinks, oh my God, I just ruined this sport for her. And I shocked him by saying, they're getting away from us. And he had no idea that I was competitive. anything like that. And so that's how it kind of started. And I mean, I don't even know what place I got. It was nowhere near the front, but his pride in me that I finished made me want to run again. And so it wasn't really serious. It was just something I would do with my grandpa a few times a year. I grew up, you know, I'm from northern Minnesota, so we figure skated, I danced, I skied, all of the things. And then when I was in middle school was the first time I went out for organized running. And it was the first sport I ever did. I mean, I played every sport, I'm telling you. Like I had like private lessons in every sport. Because my mom remarried someone who was very, very sporty. But it was the first time when I ran for the organized team that I could just run, right? Like I didn't have to think about how the racket was in my hand or how I was doing my blade or where I was going to strike the soccer ball. Like I had to think about those things while I was playing or how my pole was planted. Like I could just run. And so I fell in love with it pretty quickly. And then I ran throughout high school, was pretty good, won some state titles and made the nationals twice as a high schooler. And then I went on to the University of Colorado on a very small scholarship. I struggled with my running for a while. I'm 5'8" now. When I started running, I wasn't even 5 feet tall. So my body changed. And my first couple of years at Colorado, I was very, also ran, not really noteworthy at all. But by the time I was a senior, I won 3 national titles. And I really had bought into I could be one of the best in the United States and maybe even in the world if I had the opportunity to keep pursuing it. So
you were like, by all accounts, as an athlete, like a relatively late bloomer, right?
Yeah, and definitely in the professional sense, because I graduated at 22, and then for the next 4 years, I just couldn't stay healthy. I had a string of stress fractures. I had a hard time even qualifying for the national meet, let alone thinking about going to the Olympics. Like I was barely getting into the national meet. So yeah, I was in my late 20s when I finally started to stay healthy and things really started to click.
Was there just a very quick aside, just like a training strategy or something that you were doing incorrectly that you sort of pivoted into that allowed you to stay healthy, compete at a higher level? I'm just curious because if you're repeatedly getting injured as an athlete, like diet or training or something's off completely.
Yeah, I think I hadn't bought into being a full-time athlete, right? Even though I had my Nike contract, I would go, my husband also, he's an Olympian and he also runs, and he and I would go to practice in the morning and we'd run really, really hard. And then we'd come home and hang out and play like games. And then maybe we'd go for a second run and then we'd be working on the house, like finishing the basement. And we weren't thinking about it as like workout, eat right, nap, weight room, second workout, nap, like we just didn't think about it like that. And it really wasn't until the end of 2004, when we moved out to Oregon to join this Nike Oregon project. I mean, our lives were turned upside down because that was the first time we had been in a truly professional setting. I remember we had been there for 2 weeks and I was like, I'm so tired. I don't know if I can ever like run again, because we had training, then we had drills.
It's a lot.
Yeah, weightlifting.
At that level. Yeah.
Then we get a massage, and we'd go home and take a nap. Then we meet again in the afternoon and run again. And we had just never done that. But also included in that team, I got to see ART therapists once a week, massage therapists once a week. I was getting all this body work and helping me stay ahead of my weaknesses. And also, I really realized as I got older, I'm just a more muscular runner than a lot of other runners. And like really leaning into the weight room and really leaning into strength training really helped me stay healthy.
When I love, and this is actually after, so you said you already had your first Nike contract. Like, I'm just wondering what it's going to take to get you at this point to realize that you're actually good at what you're doing when you're getting a Nike contract.
I mean, I'm so lucky I got that first contract in. Cause I think it was because I had run, and won 3 titles in college, and I'd won by a lot. And so it looked like, wow, she finally stayed healthy for a couple of years, and look what she did. What could she do if she could stay healthy for longer? But I signed that Nike contract and immediately had to have like knee surgery, like it was like.
I'm sure they love that.
Yeah. And honestly, like if my husband hadn't been still running, I don't know that I would have stuck with it because it just kept breaking my heart. I had dreams of going to the Olympics. I had dreams of like really being somebody. And here I was like, could barely even qualify for the national meet and not even think about moving on beyond the national meet. So I definitely had moments where I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I had applied for a postgraduate scholarship and gotten it and passed on it. It was just like, I used to be somebody, but my husband was still living the life day after day. And so that helped me stay in it, and seeing his successes, like, okay, I do still want to do this.
I love that. I think that's, I mean, first of all, there's like two very obvious cliche lessons, like your partner is important. And then also like nothing is an overnight success. Like these are cliches that just everyone, it doesn't matter what you've accomplished. It's so, so true. So you made your first Olympic team at 29.
Yeah, literally days before I turned 30.
Okay, so
like I was basically 30. I turned 30 like 4 days after. Yeah.
And that's very, I don't mean to sound rude, that's very old, right? For an Olympic athlete. Yeah.
I mean, just to be fair, women's distance running is getting older. Like we are more peaky.
I don't know the age. I don't know the age group. So
it's not like gymnastics, but I had never made a team before. And usually in your 30s, you're making your second or third team. So it was late, but it's not unheard of. Yeah.
No, I mean, you did it. You did it successfully. So, okay. So obviously that is like peak achievement for a runner. Like that's when your career is like, I guess, starting more or less, because that's when you start to get exposure. That's when you're starting to compete internationally. I'm assuming that's when sponsors start to make notice of you as well, because I mean, as a runner, there's no league, there's no money really until it's sponsor money. I don't like, and Olympics are like, they are for like amateurs. That's what Olympics are for. They're not meant to be for professionals, right? That's the, they're not meant to be for like
you. So actually, you don't get anything for going to the Olympics, and in fact,
at all?
No.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And even if you win a medal, you don't get anything from the IOC, the International Olympic Committee. You might get something from your sponsor. You might have a bonus structure built in, but like you don't get anything because you're supposed to love it and you're supposed to be doing it for your country. I will say World Athletics, which is the head of track and field, they announced this year that they will be giving $50,000 to every gold medalist in track and field this year. And it's been met with, it's been controversial because some people say you should be paying them more. And some people are saying you shouldn't be paying them at all. Like the Olympics are for your love of your country and the pride of yourself. So it's been met with a little controversy, but that's the first time that people get paid for it.
That's really interesting. So that's new. So again, my background's hockey. So the only reason I know about the professional versus amateur is because I remember growing up, there's certain NHL athletes that couldn't compete in the Olympics. I think they were still in the playoffs and they were still getting paid. So it wasn't off season. So they weren't able to qualify. I think that was the rule that I sort of learned about this. So you're not supposed to be getting paid as an athlete if you're competing in the Olympics by some sort of like organization or body. But now you're saying that's changed.
Things have changed. Obviously, like when the dream team happened in basketball, like it's not the same pure thing that it once was. Yeah. But that still is the overall consensus. Like your gold medal, you still get paid in other ways because you do appearances and you get contracts, but the Olympic Committee does not pay you and they still don't. So this is track and field is the first time that their governing body is going to be paying people for their medals. And like I said, seems like that makes sense.
It makes a ton of sense. It actually, so I only like sort of remotely follow like college sports and like what Olympic athletes make. And I know that a lot of them don't make a lot of money at all, but it always seems silly that they didn't get paid. It always seems silly that college athletes couldn't get paid because it always felt like, we're not talking about your specific story where athletes were actually taken advantage of, but it always felt like all athletes were taking advantage of to some degree because they're the ones that are bringing the eyeballs. They're the ones that are training. They're the ones that are actually putting in the work, yet they're the only people that don't get paid. Everyone else gets paid.
I think that's blatantly obvious on the moneymaker sports, on football and basketball, right? Like for track and field and cross country, we rely on the football team's success for our budget, right? So, but people are paying and buying jerseys and all this stuff for these other sports.
I know.
And they're not getting anything, So, that is changing, which is good.
So, talk to me about when you joined the Nike Oregon project, and then I guess you met Alberto Salazar. That was in 2004, correct?
Yep. It was at the end of 2004. It was after the Olympics because he had been over there with one of his athletes. And my husband and I, we were in Colorado and we just weren't running well. He had made the 2000 Olympic team and he won the Olympic trials in 2000. And in 2004, we made it to the trials, but we both got knocked out in the first round. We didn't even make the final. And I had been seventh, 4 years earlier, and he had been first. And so we just said, what are we doing? Like, we only have so much time left in the sport. We really need to look around. So we started talking to some coaches, and then Nike said, you guys should really come out and visit with Alberto, check out the Nike Oregon project. So when he got back from the Athens Olympics, he flew us out there. And I mean, it was just like, as I mentioned earlier, it was professionalized sport. You know, it was like, you know, we were living in Superior, Colorado, because we couldn't afford a house in Boulder. And we were driving to the college to meet our college coach to train, even though he's a college coach, which we love him, by the way. Still have a great relationship with him. And he actually coached me at the end of my career again. But now we're going on the Nike campus. You know, we're training in the Lance Armstrong Center. We're running on the Ronaldo field. We're all of these things.
It's a different level.
It's totally different, right? Like underwater treadmills, Ultra G treadmills, access to, if my shin is sore, I don't have to fill out a form and get the Olympic Training Center to approve me to come. I'm getting in that day for an MRI, right? It was just so different. And it would be, and Alberto was like, don't sell your house, come for 6 months. If you hate it, you can go back. And we were just sort of like, we would be crazy to pass up this opportunity.
Because everything, right? I mean, like when you're looking at it outside in, like how could Nike screw anything up? It's Nike. Like Nike must have vetted the best of the best. They invested all the money. Like anybody who's working with Nike, this is not like some no-name trainer.
Not like a upstart company, you know?
No, but I guess so was Larry Nassar, right? He was also like a very notable name with a good reputation.
To see him. Yeah, he's the guy that can fix you, right? But yeah, I do remember saying the only thing that scared me about going there was that we were going to have everything you could possibly need to be successful. And I remember telling Adam, I'm worried I'm going to find out I'm not as good as I hoped I was. Like, that's how I knew if we went there and I couldn't do it, I just couldn't do it. I just wasn't that good.
So right off the bat, you're like mentally, you're saying, I'm sort of like trusting this guy's expertise. I'm going to trust you're trusting whatever he does at this point, because you're just like basically saying, I'm submitting myself to him and his training program, and whatever he says, he knows better than me. He's worked with better athletes than me. It's okay. I see. There's a power dynamic that's not healthy right off the bat.
And it was a men's only team. We were actually recruited there because of my husband, and I was sort of like a consolation. Like Alberto said, he wanted to coach Adam, and he's like, but I'll also coach you. You know, and he said, I coach high school boys. That's about similar level. And it did not hurt my feelings. I was like, okay, I wanted the opportunity. I was like, this is the best program in the world. I get to be the first woman to ever be here. Like, I'm in. I want to be a part of this so bad. So yeah, I mean, we both felt so lucky. And we literally a few weeks later, we were driving out to Oregon from Colorado.
Where did Alberto come from? Like, where did he come?
He's actually born in Cuba, but he moved to the United States really young. I think before he was 2.
Well, I didn't mean like literally where he was. I meant like where did he come from professionally? Like where did Nike find him from?
Well, so he grew up on the East Coast, and he was an extremely good high school runner. And then he ended up going to the University of Oregon, where he won a bunch of titles. And he came in right after Steve Prefontaine, who died in a car accident. And you know, Nike, a lot of Nike is based off of Pre. Like a lot of the ethos, and their biggest track meet is the Prefontaine Classic. And when Alberto was coming through Oregon, they were sort of desperate for another Pre, and he kind of fit the very different personalities, but he fit the mold of like kind of being brash and being very successful. And then he ran the marathon, and he won New York City 3 years in a row, and he won Boston, and he just seemed to be this god. I mean, there until recently, there was an Alberto Salazar building on the Nike campus. So he was just like the next great American distance runner, and Nike is built out of running. I mean, Bill Bowerman and Phil Knight were runners. So that's how, and he went to the U of O, which is where they were. And that's how.
So everything was like kind of aligning. It was like, it made sense. Okay. So Project Oregon, for people that are not part of this world, was really built around Alberto Salazar. Like that was, yeah.
It's his idea. He saw the Boston Marathon, and there was one American in the top 10, and everyone was going crazy. And he was like, remember when we used to win this? Like, this is crazy. And so he basically went, you know, he's very close with Phil Knight, and he said, I want to start something. I want to get American distance runners back on the podium. Originally, he was thinking more marathon, but as it progressed, he went to the track as well. And he got a huge budget, and he just had to convince people that he was a good coach, because he hadn't been coaching. You know, he was his own entity and athlete and stature.
Which, funny enough, doesn't always translate.
Yes. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. So the Oregon Project had been around for 4 years before we got there. And he had definitely had success. He put Dan Brown on the Olympic team in 2004 in 2 different events. But I think the thing he saw in Adam and a little bit in me is that he hadn't had like an NCAA champion come there, right? He had guys that were pretty good, but never like won necessarily. And so he was super excited about the opportunity to work, especially with Adam, someone that had made an Olympic team, was obviously very talented, had won a national title in high school and college. And, you know, after we got there, over the next 2 years, the Oregon Project really became more and more and more serious and, you know, bigger name athletes coming in.
So, I mean, there was a point when you felt something was off with him. I'm curious, out of all the cohort of athletes outside of Adam and all the other people that your husband and all the other people that you sort of communicated with and interacted with on a day-to-day, are you the first person that felt something was off, or was there like whispers and rumors, or was it like nothing? Did you feel like you were sort of shouting into a void that something was a little bit weird and uncomfortable?
I mean, Adam and I both felt like things were a little off here and there. Just certain rules that he felt were stupid. You know, that bothered us a little bit. Definitely bothered Adam a lot. Like he felt like NCAA rules were stupid. Just certain things. So there were little things, but it's kind of like this.
But NCAA rules is different than like predatory coach.
Right. But that's the point, is like we had a teammate that was in college, and it was sort of like you start to compromise your standards. So we compromise a little bit on the NCAA stuff, right? And then we compromise a little bit on how he treats this person. Then we compromise a little bit on that. And I think that's how it built over time. I didn't see the predatory behavior. I mean, looking back, I did. But in those moments, I was just like, oh, I'm getting attention. Like Alberto cares about me right now. He's talking to me right now. And for someone who obviously has issues with wanting a male figure in their life to look up to, and also just being such a driven athlete, it's just hard to describe, but it's like this slow burn. And when you look back, you can see how it was happening. But in the moment, you know, it went so far before I was like, oh my God, I can't be here anymore.
I think that someone's how we view someone and how others view people and their charisma and their accolades and their resume, it's like it's a little bit intoxicating to a degree, and you don't realize it's some shit that they do is pretty fucked up.
Intoxicating is the perfect word. I've actually used that in other interviews. It's like he is so charismatic. Like he charmed my family. And not everyone's, people aren't all good and all bad. He's funny. He's smart. He's very engaging. He looks you straight in the eye when he meets you. He like really makes you feel like he's paying attention to you. And he's famous worldwide. I remember we were racing in Europe and we got in a cab, and the cab driver just started freaking out because Alberto Salazar was in his cab, right? Like, you're living in this world. He has a building on the Nike campus. He's huge. And so you like the attention, even if it makes you a little bit uncomfortable at times. It is a little bit intoxicating. You feel like, well, he's singling me out of all these people. And it's sort of like a slippery slope.
Because when I look at your story, there's all these different pieces to it. And I could see that all this stuff happening at the same time. So we talk about the drugs and the doping, and then there's a sports psychologist that comes into this, Darren Treasure. And then there was, I think, sexual advances on you as well. But I think you, at the time, you were like, you didn't really realize how wrong those things were in the moment. And then I think so I want to just understand sort of the environment that you're in, because there's a lot happening at the same time. So it's not just sexual advances. It's not just authority figures that maybe aren't guiding you in the right direction. It's not just doping. And I think you've seen like syringes and stuff. Like, it's a lot of shit happening at once. And I feel like for somebody who's just trying to like win at life and be a high performance person, this is a lot of distractions, a lot of stress. So I think you're just like, okay, I'm focusing on my North Star. I'm going there. and all this other shit. It's not quite right, but I don't want to let it jeopardize my life and my career. And this is like go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, I couldn't second guess the explanations I was given, right? If the syringes in the refrigerator are for allergy shots, that's what I got to go with. Because if they're not, if I even think for a second, I don't know if that's true. Now I've completely compromised. I'm living here. The shots are in the fridge. Anybody could think they're used on, same with like the dirty jokes and the talking to me about sexual stuff. I'm like, hey, I'm the only woman here. Don't be the prude. Don't get kicked out. Just roll with it, laugh with it. Just don't be that person, and we had this sports psychologist, and he is not a sports psychologist, but we were told he was, and they're working in tandem together.
That's also very sketchy.
And so it's just like, again, I think it goes back to my childhood a lot of like, if there was an Olympic gold medal for compartmentalization, I am winning it, right? Yeah. I'm like, syringes, it has to be allergy shots because otherwise everything I believe in and everyone I care about is a lie. Psh, put it over here.
Yeah.
I don't like it when Alberto talks to me like that, but he also calls my mom and tells me he loves me and says that he feels like he's a father figure. So I'm just going to remember he's a father figure. So that uncomfortable stuff, put it over here. And I just can't let anything else come in. And I'm running really well. And I'm like, when did I start running really well? When I came here. So I don't want to risk losing this because this is the path to everything I've ever dreamt of.
So maybe just help me understand like this timeline of your life with Alberto and what was going on with, because there's a couple people that are involved in this story. I've read that Dr. Jeffrey Brown was a doctor that all people were going to. There's a sports psychologist, Darren Treasure. So can you maybe, in your words, just summarize all the different things that were happening that obviously you've written about in your book? Just very, very, just a quick summary of all the different people and players that were taking part in what eventually you testified about this story. So just so people can wrap their heads around all the different things that were happening, all the different players. And it's actually wild because when you think about all the people involved, I think that most people would probably have the exact same reaction as you. Like there's so many people that have been like signed off on that are part of basically this, I don't know, I don't want to call it like a cult, but it's like a little bit of like a, whatever it is, a little bit of a cult. It's like, how could this be anything but legitimate and exactly what they say it is? So just walk everybody through sort of the few key players.
Yeah, so obviously Alberto is the head coach and he is the super famous athlete that everyone loves. And then we have Darren Treasure, who we were told was a sports psychologist. Turns out he is not a psychologist, doesn't even have a degree in psychology, but we had to meet with him twice a week. We had to tell him like our biggest fears. At first we were told everything was confidential, but then it would start to come out later. Like Alberto would say, why did you tell Darren you were worried about that workout? Or why'd you tell Darren but you have to see them because they work together and Alberto and Darren travel together. And in fact, when I would go to the starting line of a race, I would talk to Alberto and give him a hug. And then the last person that would talk to me would be Darren. Like it was so controlling. And then there's Dr. Jeffrey Brown, because everyone on the team had an underactive thyroid, supposedly, right? So I had seen Dr. Jeffrey Brown recommended to me by the USATF, which is the United States Track and Field Association. And they recommended Dr. Brown as a credible endocrinologist. He had actually been at one point associated with USATF. And I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism there. I took a low level of Synthroid, but all of a sudden, all of my teammates are also going to see him. All of a sudden, he's on payroll. He comes to the Beijing Olympics with us. And, I do believe that people have underactive thyroid, but I'm starting to see what are the odds that everybody on this team, and then there were some of us that were just on Synthroid, but then there were other people that were on different medications. Then there was another doctor, I don't want to say his name because he passed away. I didn't get to see him, which is interesting, but he prescribed inhalers. So most of the team was also on an inhaler. And so there's all these people that are a part of the team, right? And everything's about getting every little advantage.
I just want to take a second and thank the HubSpot Podcast Network for sponsoring the show's success story. We've been part of their network for the past 3 years now. If you're a podcast fan, you have to check out some of the other incredible podcasts in the HubSpot Podcast Network, like My First Million, hosted by Sam Parr and Sean Puri. They feature famous guests like Alex Hormozi, Sophia Amoruso, Hassan Minhaj, sharing their secrets on how they made their first million and how to apply their learnings to capitalize on today's business trends and opportunities. Listen to My First Million wherever you get your podcasts. And these drugs, what like, just to clarify, what do these drugs do? Okay, like, people can read between the lines. They're obviously being used for performance enhancement to some degree, but I'm assuming that by the Olympics committee, if they're prescribed, they're okay.
They're okay, right? So you can get an inhaler if you have a prescription for one, but it helps. Obviously, it dilates your lungs and it dilates all the little things and it helps you get more airflow. Thyroid is a little trickier because if you take too much and you don't need it, then your thyroid stops working, which is eventually what happened to me long term. But then there are also medications in the endocrinology space that I was not prescribed, but that my teammates were. Something called Cytomel that you would take right before you run, which is arguably a performance enhancer. So at this point, a lot of people would call this gray area because technically you can use an inhaler if you have a doctor's prescription or Flovent, all these different allergy things. And technically you can take all these different medications if you have a thyroid condition. But this really is what we call now medicalization of the sport, using medicine to get advantages that you otherwise wouldn't have. I mean, what are the odds that everybody on this team had horrific allergies, horrific lung capacity, and thyroid conditions? I mean, this is, how would we all have gotten to this place?
No, of course. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous when, of course. But it's okay. So when was like the straw that broke the camel's back? When was like the moment between you and Adam? Because obviously you're having conversations about this at this point, and you're probably back and forth saying like, this is not normal. Because you testifying, it's probably pretty scary, because I'm sure the thought, is this going to totally blow up my entire career, crossed your mind? Probably a lot, quite a bit, more than once for sure. So what's that moment?
I mean, honestly, it was a lot of little things. Like, my coach had a prescription for androgel, which is topical testosterone. And I started to, I would live with him. Adam and I would live with him and a teammate when we would travel. And I started to get really uncomfortable that I was around it. It would just be sitting out. And, you talk about blowing up. When I first went into USADA to tell them what I thought I knew or what I had seen, I was crying. And I was like, I might have been doped and I don't know. Like, I'm terrified that maybe he rubbed that on me. And anyway, long story short, I was able to get a hold of all of my medical records. It took a really long time because people didn't want me to have them, but they were able to look for patterns in my testosterone, and thank God it was totally good. But it wasn't with all my teammates. But anyway, it was just building, right? All these things are building, and we had gotten a new teammate, and Adam had left the team. He was basically just supporting me, like still running with me and around with the team, but he wasn't racing for the team anymore. And I had my son. I mean, there was just so much building. And I was in Eugene at a meet, and Adam wasn't there. And I watched one of my teammates do something, and I called him and told him what I just saw. And he said, "Do you think they're cheating?" And I couldn't believe how quickly I just said yes. I couldn't believe it. I had never admitted to anyone that I actually thought they were cheating. Like, I had said, "That's weird," or "I don't understand that," or "That doesn't make sense," but I had never said it. And that would have been probably in June. And then we still had, it was a world championship year. So it was like, okay, I just need to stay on the straight and narrow, get through the world championships, make the Olympic team next year, and then I can move on.
Have you said publicly what that thing was that prompted that reaction?
That made me think you were cheating?
Yeah.
It was one of my teammates winning this 10,000, and I just didn't believe it. I didn't believe what I saw at all.
Oh, you didn't see them like injecting something. You just saw the result. Okay. I got you. Sorry. I understand.
Yeah. And then I started to look back at other things, like the way they were working out versus the way I was working out. I actually did talk to Alberto about that, and he kind of gaslit me and was like, "Well, you had a baby and you're a woman." And I'm like, okay, well, we've always trained the same, and you still have to recover, whether you're a female or a male. But I kind of was just like walking on eggshells trying to get through the world championships. And the thing that finally broke me, which is pretty embarrassing, because you have to think This has been building for years. I've actually been sexually assaulted by my coach by this point twice.
Really? Oh, I didn't realize that. Oh, shit. Okay, that's another part of the story. So Alberto actually sexually assaulted you?
Yes. But I had convinced myself it was a mistake, whatever. Anyway, we're on the plane headed to Daegu, and I've left my husband and my child at home, and he came on to me, and it's kind of embarrassing, but that's what broke me, because everything else I could kind of compartmentalize and I could kind of make an excuse for it, but this was just so blatant. And I just remember I'm on this flight from Portland to South Korea, and I just went, or maybe I was to Tokyo first, I don't remember, but I just went in the bathroom and just started crying. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. And so it was after the World Championships where I told my husband, I can't do this anymore. Like, I cannot. And I hadn't told my husband about everything that had happened. And then I slowly started to open up to him. But it's kind of sad that that's what made me leave and not all of the stuff before. But that was for whatever mental reason, that's what I just felt, just so degraded, basically. This was supposed to be my father figure, you know?
When you start to sort of speak up, I guess when you testify as well, what else starts to come out about him?
You know, it's one of those things where, like, once you finally remove yourself from the situation and then you look back, you see how it was so different than you thought. Like, honestly, when you said it was like a cult, that's actually a great term, because we didn't question anything. I didn't question anything. When I got away from it, I mean, I had to go to therapy. I started to look at things and talk about things. And, you know, my family would be staring at me like this with their eyes like that, saying, Kara, that is not normal. That is not what happens between an athlete and a coach, or the way people talk to each other. And it really was an undoing, honestly. Like, I ran well for a couple of years. I made another Olympic team, and then I just kind of hit bottom. And it took me a couple of years of like really working on myself. And I don't know. It's like reliving everything again, but with like a pair of glasses on, you know? And it's like you're angry at yourself and you're sad, and there's all these conflicting emotions, because you still, even with all the bad stuff, there's still good stuff. So you're still mourning not having these people in your life anymore, which is super weird, but you are still.
But that's a definition of, like, it's like, that's like Stockholm syndrome. That's like, these are I don't know what this particular version is called, but like the narcissism and the gaslighting, it's only effective if you have a relationship with that person, right? And then they take advantage of that relationship. And I'm no expert on narcissism and gaslighting, but I think this is why people, to an extreme degree, stay in abusive relationships, because they always justify, well, it was just a one-time thing. It was just it's not going to happen again.
Yeah. And I mean, that's how I got through it. I convinced myself it's a mistake, or he had too much to drink, or whatever I would say, you know, to justify the behavior, and then put it away.
Yeah.
And, you know, when it really started to unfold and when I really started to deal with it, I was embarrassed. I remember calling my family and being like, I'm embarrassed. Like, these things happened to me, and I never told you, and I never told anyone. And, you know, my mom and sister were horrified. So was my husband. Telling my husband some of this stuff was horrible. I've learned through therapy and meeting a lot of other people that that's actually totally normal, that you don't tell and you just keep it to yourself. But yeah, I think that
I think you have to, right, to heal properly.
Yes, totally. And I just think another thing just that I want people to understand is it's not like you see it for what it is and then you're just totally over it. Right? Like I said, I have spent 7 years with these people. They were my entire world, you know, and they were the only people I hung out with. I've lived with them. I traveled with them. I trained with them on a daily basis. So it was really hard. It was really hard to leave, and it was hard for a long time.
As you go through your healing process, you took a really strong stance and you started to speak out And I think that not only that probably helped you heal to a degree, but I mean, then you start to like, I love your perspective of you'll never fully come to terms with what happened, but you have to reframe as to why you're speaking out about it, why it's not something to be embarrassed about. And I think that what you've done very well is you've realized that at the end of the day, this happened to you, and it's horrific, but think of the potential of not speaking out and not calling out this bullshit behavior, because then what's going to happen to the next woman athlete that goes through this program or whatever? Because this is a wildly recognized program. This is something that was supposed to be the epitome of Nike, of performance, tied into the Olympics, tied into professional running. So I think that you have to speak up. Like I think that you're doing a lot of people a disservice if you didn't. That's the way I feel, at least. But
being through therapy and stuff, I look at myself in those times very differently now. Like I actually was surviving. I was doing the best that I could. Like I really was. But yes, honestly, a big, testifying against him on the doping side was super hard, but testifying against him on the sexual assault stuff was way harder. And I almost didn't do it. I actually said I can't do it at first, but the reason I ended up doing it was that I have two nieces. They both run. And I just started to think like, they're being raised the same way I am. To be kind, be respectful, appreciate your opportunities, which is how I raised my son too. Yeah. And they could find themselves in the same situation, and I could help stop that.
What's really messed up? Like, this is not like we're having a conversation about something that happened 100 years ago. We're having a conversation about something that happened, like you testified in 2021. Which is, that's less than 3 years ago.
Yeah, this stuff happens, and I think that's why I would never tell a survivor you have to talk about it, because everyone's on their own path. But if you can, I think you should, because the more that we talk about it, the more that we destigmatize it, and the more the next group of women or girls won't take this shit. You know what I mean? They'll know, no, we don't have to deal with that. I don't have to be treated like that.
The whole environment has to change, because outside of sexual assault and harassment and misconduct, outside of the doping, even the formal policies that Nike had towards treatment of pregnant athletes was archaic.
Well, there was no policy.
Yeah. So policy is putting it nicely, right? So there was no policy. So you think about all these factors combined, the fact that you still sort of succeeded in spite of is very admirable. It's just phenomenal, because all of this is almost like it's all stacked against you. It's all stacked against you. So super difficult sort of period of your life. And it's that the testifying is very recent. What changes have been made to, like, walk me through even like the outcome of Alberto Salazar, Project Oregon? What happened with the testifying about the doping? What happened with the testifying of the sexual assault and abuse? What was the result?
So the first hearing on the doping stuff was USADA versus Alberto Salazar and Dr. Jeffrey Brown. And I testified there for hours in both cases. They were handed down a 4-year, so it was held before the American Arbitration Association, and they were both handed down a 4-year suspension in 2019, which they both immediately appealed, but he couldn't coach during that time. We had the appeal, I want to say sometime in 2020, where we all testified again. And this was in front of CAS, which is the Court of Arbitration of Sport, and they upheld the ban. So he served a 4-year ban from October 2019 until his ban was lifted last year. But there was also the safe sport side. There was originally 3 people on the safe sport side, that 2 other women that testified with me. And that the first hearing, he wasn't there. We got to talk in private, and he was banned for life. Then he appealed that decision as well. So we went in front of a judge, and at that time, he had witnesses. I didn't have any. It wasn't me versus him. It was the safe sport versus Alberto Salazar. That testifying was honestly ranked like probably the worst experience of my life.
Because you're reliving it.
You're reliving it, and then you have his lawyer telling you a liar the whole time, second guessing it, making you describe it over and over again, then saying, well, you said it was this, and now you're saying it's this. And it just was a horrific experience. But that was in 2021, and the lifetime ban was upheld. So Safe Sport only has jurisdiction in Olympic level sport in the United States. So he could still coach at the NCAA. He could coach for another
Which is
country.
horrifying. Yeah, it's like, oh, let's go put him in front of younger athletes now.
Yeah. So the jurisdiction of it isn't great, but it does prevent him from coaching Olympic level professional athletes in the United States.
And what happened? That the Safe Sport is sexual misconduct. Correct. Okay, understood. Why do we not have rules that if you get barred from coaching because of sexual harassment or assault at an Olympic level, how are you ever able to coach anybody ever again?
Because the NCAA hasn't joined Safe Sport, and so because of that, they're the only groups that have joined Safe Sport, which was decided by Congress and is funded by Congress. It's just at Olympic level sport, and it was really formed after the Larry Nassar scandal. And there's a lot of people who will say to my face, "Well, I'd run for him because he's such a good coach," and I'm like, "Oh, okay, you take that knife out of my back real quick."
Wow.
And I think that's really sad. I think it's really sad that people think, especially men, like, well, I don't care because he wouldn't do that to me. He's a great coach.
So maybe, again, I these details because you lived it. So I don't want to sound like overly simplifying, but like, why is the conversation whether or not he can coach NCAA and not, why is he not in jail? Like, I don't, it doesn't make any.
Yeah, well, to be fair, I didn't bring any charges against him in that sense. Both of the incidents were in foreign countries. One was in Italy, and the other one was in Portugal and Lisbon. And there was, the statute had run out in Italy; it had not in Portugal. And I just felt like just doing that alone was so traumatizing. And really, my goal was not to ruin his life, was not to put him in jail. It was just to make sure he couldn't do this to another athlete. And that happened, and I can live with that.
Okay. I'm sorry for going so deep on all these. I find it important to just walk through what happened, because if even one person listens to this that's going through something even remotely similar, I just want them to understand that, like, yeah, the journey is not easy, but know that there's people that will support you and you'll come out on the other side. Okay, that's really what I'm trying to get at. But
no, I'm glad. It's really hard, but it was definitely worth it on both counts. It was a lot of testifying, a lot of crying, a lot of stress.
I have no doubt. It's like, and I don't want to make you relive it a third time right now. So let's sort of move on to where you're at right now, because even before we started recording, we were talking about, just very casually, like, okay, so there's all these doping issues in U.S. sports, but this is one incident. I don't think, has there been anything significant, a doping scandal since? I haven't heard of one to the degree of what you've gone through, but then also in U.S. sports is, that's in terms of Olympics, that's one country. Then we talk about all these other countries, and you just testified this week. I think about other countries that are, not as regulated as the U.S. by any means. And I'm just thinking, if this is going on in the U.S., I mean, like, it's almost like comical to think that other countries would police their athletes more than the U.S. if it's going to be like an international competition where your country's reputation is on the line.
Yeah. So I was the last couple of days I was in DC. I wasn't testifying. I was meeting with senators and congressmen, asking them to support USADA. So USADA is the United States Anti-Doping Agency, and I'm on their board now. Their 10-member board. So obviously I speak with a little bit of bias, but they do the most testing in the world, and they have the most robust testing program. And I think it's great because U.S. athletes that are doing well, you can trust in them more than you can a lot of other athletes, because they are being tested on a regular basis and they are being held to the highest standard. But USADA is not the top, right? The top is WADA, which is the World Anti-Doping Agency, and we all answer to WADA. So every country has their own what's called NATO, which is their national organization of anti-doping. And what came out a couple of weeks ago was that there were 23 positives. I'm going to try to say this as simply as possible. Sorry, we can totally get into the weeds on this if you want. But this drug TMZ.
Yeah. TMZ is a new, I don't even know what the drug TMZ is. I just know of the celebrity news outlet, but yeah.
It's a manufactured, it's not clenbuterol that could be found in meat. It is only made in a pill form. It is 100%. If it is in your body, it can't be contaminated through anything, right? It's not
you have
like
to take
that.
it via pill. Yeah.
Yes. So this drug became famous because Valieva, the young Russian figure skater at the Beijing Olympics, she had tested positive for it. And at first she said her grandfather had burped on her drink and her father had a prescription for it. And then she changed it to, and she's a young teenager. So like someone else is making up the story. Yeah. And they changed it to, he had made her a strawberry dessert and he had spit up in that or whatever they said. Anyway, she ended up with a 4-year ban and it was really bad because she skated at the Olympics and she displaced people, but then the medals were reawarded. Long story short, in 2021, there was a swimming competition in China that helped select their Olympic team. Remember, the 2021 Olympics were deferred a year. So, it's the Olympic year in 2021. They're having this competition. 23 Chinese athletes test positive for TMZ. Now, according to the rules, if you're under WADA, which you have to be certified to compete in these events, if there's a positive test, it has to be reported, whether you find no fault, because sometimes there are no fault cases, right? Sometimes it is from the meat. I mean, it's very rare, but it does happen. But even if it's no fault, these have to be reported. And what happened was it wasn't reported. They had their own investigation 3 months after the fact, and they said that they found traces of TMZ in the sink and in the vents in the kitchen of the hotel where the athletes were staying. So just a few things here. This is a pill, right? It's not like in your cleaning supplies or anything like that. And then also this is during COVID. This is in 2021 in January where COVID things are high. So you're going to tell me that they didn't clean the kitchen, that 2-3 months later they were able to find traces of this. Whatever. It is what it is. 13 of these athletes.
23, no?
Well, 23 positive. So CHINADA, which is their anti-doping agency, eventually reports it to WADA saying this is a mass contamination case. We're not going to hold anyone accountable. WADA says, sure, that makes sense. And nothing gets announced. 13 of these athletes end up swimming in the Olympics. I think 5 or 6 of them end up winning medals at the Olympic Games. And no one knows. And so there's whistleblowers that went to WADA and said these athletes are using TMZ and it's been covered up. WADA doesn't do an investigation. So finally, these whistleblowers start going to the media and they actually come to USADA as well. So the New York Times spent 1.5 years investigating this and finally blew open this story the other day. It's crazy. WADA, if we can't trust WADA, our world, then what can we do? Like, who do we trust? So U.S. taxpayer dollars go to fund WADA. United States is the biggest funder of WADA. It's $4 million. You pay, it's cents for you, but you pay to fund this World Anti-Doping Agency, and they're not following their own rules. Other things that have come out in this is that the Chinese gave WADA an extra $1.9 million over what they're supposed to give, which that's not supposed to happen. You're not supposed to take any extra money because it's a conflict of interest. And $500,000 of that was noted for investigative purposes. Also, another thing that's come out in the last couple of days, is that there's this sportswear company in China. I think it's pronounced Anta. It's ANTA. They outfit the Chinese Olympic swim team. They outfit the Chinese Olympic team, and they also have been paying WADA. So the conflicts of interest here are just so bad.
That's interesting. Well, it's almost like, it sounds like this all started with like a really lazy scam. It's like, well, it's a little suspicious if one person has TMZ, but if we just give everybody TMZ, they can't actually think that we did that on purpose. So like, they're just going to forget. It's like it's not even like an intellectually complicated plot. It's just like, no, we'll just give everyone TMZ and say it was an accident. Like, I'm sure they'll believe that.
Is that there was 180 athletes staying at that hotel, right? So if everybody's eating the same food and everyone's contaminated, everyone's going to test positive. And I think what's really hard moving forward is that first, CHINADA did not use the rules that you have to use according to WADA. WADA didn't investigate it. They accepted the explanation. And just from the optics, it looks like, okay, so this was just months out from the Olympic Games. Oh, the other point that is important to note is that the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, is 50% of the funding for WADA. So WADA doesn't necessarily want a big scandal on the eve of the Olympic Games. And then remember, just a few months later, Beijing hosted the Winter Olympics. So just everything about it, like banning these Chinese athletes right before the Olympics, when knowing that the next Olympics are being held in Beijing just months later because of COVID, it's bad. But now athletes are pissed, and not just in the United States, all over the world, because if we can't trust WADA, what are we doing? So basically, was on the Hill meeting with different senators and Congress people and just basically pleading our case to hold WADA accountable. Because right now, no one can actually hold WADA accountable. The only way we could maybe is by like removing their funding. But we need WADA. The United States can't be in charge of everything. That would be crazy and a huge conflict of interest. So we need a robust, trustful World Anti-Doping Agency. But right now, we do not have it. And the athletes are mad. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, who elects the leadership at WADA?
So some of them are through the IOC. It's so complicated. The vice chair is someone from China. It's very political, and that's part of the problem. And I don't know if you'll remember when the whole Russian doping scandal happened, Sochi, and there was a movie about it called Icarus. So after that, it was like, how could this have happened? How could we have not known that they were swapping samples, that they were covering up tests? And WADA said basically, like, we don't have enough money. Like, we don't have the jurisdiction to hold them accountable. We don't have the funding. We don't have an investigative team. And so after that, in 2017, all of these people, Michael Phelps testified, people from other countries did, and WADA was reformed. And so now they can hold countries accountable, and they do have the funding. Their funding is huge. Their funding went up 52% between 2019 and 2023. And yet they didn't follow their own rules, right? So it's just this really bad situation. And I have a lot of empathy for the athletes. 3 of these athletes that won medals at the last Olympics have already qualified for the Paris Olympics. 2 more might as well. And athletes, I mean, obviously the swimmers are the most mad. They're like, so I have to go race this person who I know failed a drug test for the last Olympics and beat me, and now they're coming back. I mean, just imagine, talking about having to compartmentalize and not having to totally put that aside. So yeah, basically it's a huge disaster. And it's really sad.
It's almost like, so there's doping issues globally, and this is just one that was really prevalent.
Honestly, if it hadn't been a whistleblower that blew it open, we wouldn't even know about it because it would have been just swept under the rug. It was swept under the rug.
So you got to think about all these other countries. I'm curious if you still think that there's doping issues in the U.S. with certain sports, but also with other countries. I mean, this was one whistleblower. So it's interesting because the U.S. has the most testing facilities and the most testing. And still the U.S. athletes still win. They're still, they still do quite well. So if every U.S. athlete was always losing, that would be a little bit of a red flag. But U.S. athletes are still winning, and I don't think doping is across all sports in the U.S. I'm sure some people try and get away with it or whatnot, but I think that the checks and balances and the rules make it probably a little bit difficult for a U.S. athlete to dope as much as maybe a Chinese athlete or a Russian athlete or whatever. Pick a country, doesn't matter, right? But I am curious, what just your take on what's the fix? Because you have all these different countries that all operate with different infrastructure and different ideologies and different cultures and different everything. And I don't think, every country operates from the same moral lens as the U.S. And even people within the U.S. don't always operate from a great moral lens either. But I think it's harder when there's more regulation.
But look, the U.S. is not perfect. I know you're a hockey guy, so I was asking about this. Yeah. I knew I was going to be talking to you. So you can't be USADA doesn't drug test for the NHL.
For when they do the Winter Olympics and for the Yeah.
The actual NHL. Like they also don't test the NBA or football, which I can't think of right now. But hockey, so in hockey,
The NFL, yeah.
yeah, the NFL, the biggest one, but that's the one I don't watch.
Listen, I'm Canadian too, so I'm gonna get hate for this, but I like my sport's hockey. So like I just moved down to the US, and like the love for football is beyond.
It's beyond, right? And I grew up in northern Minnesota, so like I get the hockey love. Like that was our thing.
Yeah.
We even lost our professional team for a while because we're so obsessed with the high school hockey, and now we finally have Wild again. But so I get it. But like for instance, the National Hockey League, they have their own testing, but they can't be tested at the start of the playoffs until the first game of the season.
So
I'm sorry, what? Like that's when the doping would happen, recovering in the playoffs and then in the off season when you're training and getting ready. So I just want to be clear that we have problems in the United States, and even for sports that are it's so stupid. Even for sports that are under USADA's jurisdiction, like look, if you really want to get away with it and you're willing to take a lot of risks, you might be able to. Like USADA has limitations. They can only test you from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. if you want to microdose in those other hours. But at least they have such a robust testing program that you have to be on your toes. But that doesn't mean people won't dope.
Yeah.
But what is the solution? It's so hard, but I believe the solution is everyone needs to be held to the same standard. And it should be thousands and thousands of tests a year per country. And for instance, this whole Chinada situation, they didn't follow the rules, so there should be then a sanction.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want the athletes to have to pay, but if we truly want clean sport, it's like what happened with the Russia scandal. Like it was unfortunate that there were some clean Russian athletes, I'm sure, and they provided a way for them to be able to compete, at least in track and field. Like they had to prove it, they had to live outside the country, they had to be open to more testing. But what are we doing unless we actually hold these countries accountable, and unless we actually have this standard that makes sense? It's just gonna be like this.
It's never going to be fixed.
No, it's never going to be fixed. No.
So this is, you speak on this now. You're speaking to senators. You haven't testified on this yet. Maybe one day, but maybe someday. But talk to me about because outside of athletes, I think all high performing people sort of succumb to this at some level. You exited your career in a relatively negative way. And even when people exit their career in a very positive way, so I'm thinking business person sells their company, they still have this identity crisis of what do I do now? So I can only imagine when you exit your career in a not so fun way, you must have some sort of identity crisis. And I want you to help people who do have an identity crisis, because I mean, the level that the shit that happened to you, I hope that no one else has to go through, even though I know someone else will. But the mental fortitude that you exhibit is phenomenal. And I just want people to understand, like, how did you transition into a successful, happy, productive sort of second season to your life after going through all this shit? Because I'm sure it wasn't easy.
Yeah. I mean, look, no, I'm not like the poster child. I wanted to run at the 2016 Olympics. I thought that maybe to have another child after, that would be like my glory. I'd, run in a third Olympic Games and be done. The top 3 make it in the marathon. At the trials, I was 4th, which led to literally 3 years of like questioning my value. What can I do? I was running, but really half-heartedly. I kept getting injured, which I think was my body saying, we all agreed you were going to be done after the Olympics. And I really struggled with, if I'm not making an Olympic team, what value do I have? And honestly, in a weird way, turning 40 helped a lot, because I just realized I was on the second side of life and I couldn't be worried about that anymore. But I think I was open to, I struggled for a couple of years trying to make something happen so that I would know I was done. And look,
you're trying to say I don't want my body to be able to compete anymore.
I want to have one more good race, and then I know, and it wouldn't happen. Every time I'd prepare, I'd get hurt or I'd run bad. But I understand it's so hard, and my husband went through this too. It's like you've had this pursuit for so long with blinders on almost. And the thing is, in life, a lot of times things rarely end the way you want them to, and you have to be okay with but there is a whole nother life after that. And I basically struggled for a couple of years, really questioning who I was. And then I just sort of started paying attention to opportunities. And for me, I love running, so things in the running industry. I eventually got hired by NBC. I'm the distance analyst for NBC now for all the Olympic Games and the big track meets and stuff. And I love this side of my life. It's so fun. And I get to still be in the sport, and I get all of that knowledge that I learned along the way. I'm applying here on a totally different platform, but I get to apply that. And so I totally understand the feeling of like, I'm nothing now. The thing that made me important and the thing that made me special, I can't even do that anymore. But that's actually not true. That's one thing that made you special and made you feel important. There are other sides to you. So it's acknowledging that it's a loss and it's sad and there's like a mourning period, I would say. But then realizing no one is one thing. That's just not like, no one person is just one thing. And then really being open to what else do I have to offer and what else could I do, and taking a risk. I never ever wanted to be on TV. That was nothing that ever interested me. And when NBC first asked me to audition, I told them no. And my husband said, just do it. He was like, just do it. It's an experience and it's something on your resume, And it's ended up being a career that I have absolutely loved. So I think just being open to changing and knowing that you are more than that one thing that you shined at.
You went through so many tough periods, but when you fast forward, there's a lot of good lessons that you've learned from all the different things that you've gone through. And I would love to hear a lesson that you've learned for yourself, but also maybe just a lesson for a young athlete that you wish somebody would have told you when you were first starting out.
I mean, I think one thing I wish I would have realized when I was younger is that success doesn't happen overnight. And I mean, you even mentioned that earlier, but and especially now, this day and age with like social media and everything, you feel like everyone just is crushing it right away. But the reality is, if I was talking to a young athlete, I'd say I hit my peak in my mid 30s, my early to mid 30s. And when I was 15, killing myself because I didn't PR, I couldn't have imagined that I'd be doing it for another 20 years, And so just have patience. Yeah. And just know that life is a long journey. I know we all want success right away, but good things take time, and it takes practice, and it takes loving it, and it takes working at it. So I wish someone had told me that when I was younger, because I felt like everything hinged on every race that I was running. But I think one of the things I've learned about myself is, and I think most people are, because trust me, I'm not that strong, but I'm just so much stronger than I thought I was. I've been able to weather a lot of storms, and yeah, some of them are really hard, but they've made me smarter, and they've made me more complete and more sure of who I am. And I think most people are a lot stronger than they think. You hear people say, oh, if that happened to me, that would kill me. And it really doesn't. And as long as you can work your way through it, you're actually better on the other side. I know it sounds so cheesy, but it's true.
It's so true. It's so true. I mean, you also, if I'm not mistaken, there was a neurological order, runner's dystonia. I have no idea what that means, by the way. So maybe explain, because all I understand is that it limits how you can run. Is this a physical, or is it neurological? Means it involves your mind, your brain to some capacity. Yeah. Okay. So it's not just like a physical purely. So there's a brain condition of some sort that limits how much you can run. And I want you to also just speak about how that's impacted you, but also, just thinking back of all the bullshit that you dealt with, like, this is, difficult, but you've dealt with more difficult shit. You've dealt with harder situations that ultimately, when life is, again, we just spoke about this at the beginning. Life is so strange how it works. Like, everything that happens in your life, as horrible as it can be, really does set you up for like the next chapter. And all the different things in your life that made you hard and made you able to persevere and endure, then when something like this happens, all of a sudden it's like, you know what? I've figured out how to deal with like 200 other horrible things that have happened in my life. And at the same time, I've won 10,000 times. So I'll figure this out as well. And I'm sure this is probably what allowed you to sort of tackle this with grace and not let it destroy you psychologically, mentally, physically. But as a runner, you can't run as much anymore. That's not easy. So what happened?
Yeah, so I started falling when I was running and just having lack of sensation in my lower left leg. And I fell into traffic and I finally realized like I need to go to the doctor. And it took a year to get the diagnosis because I had MRIs and I had MRIs of my brain and I had some lesions, so they thought I had MS. And then long story short, I was finally diagnosed with repetitive movement dystonia, which happens in musicians a lot or writers. It's a movement that you do again and again and again, and they don't know why it happens. A lot of people have a bad fall before it happens, and I did have a very bad fall, but I feel like the symptoms had started before that. But basically, when my left leg swings through to land on the ground, instead of just the muscles needed to land on the ground and then push off firing, everything fires at once. And so I have no sensation that I've hit the ground, that I'm pushing off the ground. You'll get this analogy because you're a hockey player. This is what I said to my doctor the first time I went in. I said, it's like I'm on the most freshly Zamboni'd ice and I have a slick shoe on and my foot comes down and I don't know that it's going to, like, it does not feel like...
I know exactly the feeling.
So many people and they just look at me with a blank face.
No, and it's actually a horrifying feeling because you feel like you just don't have control of your body at that point because your foot is just not catching and it's doing whatever it wants. It is the worst feeling.
The only person that I've ever told that like actually got it. So that's what it felt like. And it's been really frustrating. And I went and got a second opinion at the Mayo Clinic and they confirmed the diagnosis. And the doctor there told me you just have to stop running because it can get really bad. It can affect your walking, which had happened. That's what ended when I ended up going to this specialist because I was having a hard time walking. But, you know, my neurologist, she's amazing. And she's like, you used to run 135 miles a week. You used to run the Olympic marathon. Like, don't listen to them when they say you can't do it. Let's figure out a way to find out what you can do. And I'm so grateful for her. Shout out to Dr. Jill Olson. So I started going to PT. I've started doing really intensive therapies. Just to figure out a way that I can still run a little bit. And basically, the things that work best for me is I do take a Parkinson's medication before I go run to help my muscles relax a little bit and not be so controlled by my brain and not my body. And then I also get Botox injections quarterly, so every 3 months in my lower leg, so that when my brain sends the signal for everything to fire, it just can't because it's been Botox, so it's dead.
Yeah.
And so I can't run the way I used to. I can't go run up in the mountains like I used to because I catch my foot really easily. I can't tell the clearance I'm making. But I'm still getting out there and setting goals that are different. Like I set a goal a couple of weeks ago to run under my son's fastest 5K time. And I did it. And you know what? It felt pretty damn good.
I love that.
Totally different, 4 minutes slower than I used to run in the 5K, but it still felt pretty awesome.
I think that's how life is. Like you have to keep redefining your goals, right? And you have to keep redefining your goals and who you are as a person cannot be static. It has to be fluid and it has to be evolving. And I think that it's because a lot of people have trouble even accomplishing that first milestone in life, like that first major success. A lot of people try to accomplish a first major success their whole life and never even get there. But when you do accomplish something that, 0.001% of the population accomplishes, and then you're like, okay, what do I do next? Because there's no playbook. There's no playbook for life after the Olympics. Are you kidding me? Who's like it's the top 1% or 0.01% for a reason because not a lot of people get there. But as a high performing person, like this is something that you will eventually hit because you'll perform at the top of whatever sport you're in. You will make more money than most of the people that you went to high school and university with. Like, doesn't matter what the thing is. You'll build a business bigger than all your friends that are still W-2. It doesn't really matter. It's like you still have to make sure that you like take care of yourself and you take care of like your future self. And I think that a lot of people lose their identity and they lose their purpose. And just because you're a high performing person does not mean you kill it in all other areas of life. You see a lot of broken relationships, a lot of people, not from your world, from the business world, they lose their health and their wellness, both mental and physical, because they just don't have identity anymore. Or they sacrifice their identity for the one thing that they know how to do. So I think it's an even stronger person that can not pivot, but like adjust gracefully as life goes on to like a new version of themselves and be happy and proud of that.
There's many
easy.
seasons of life. Like I didn't want to be 40 and be dead and be like, well, I accomplished everything. There's no point in living. There's nothing that's going to bring me joy. It's like, no, I still have a lot. I still have more than half my life left. Like I need to reassess what it is I want. Yeah. Right. I'm like, I have a lot going on. And, but I understand that it's hard, but yes, like really redefining what success means and redefining what happiness means, it helps so much.
What would be some words of advice just for a younger athlete when they're looking to get involved with a team or a coach or a mentor? Just what would be the one rule or the one sort of just thought or insight that you give to that person, just so that hopefully they don't find themselves in the wrong space?
I think it's important when you're looking for a coach or a mentor, make sure there's someone associated with them that you can check in with that isn't going to get back to that person, right? So maybe there's like just a liaison that talks to you or a teammate, just someone, because it's hard to know, especially when you're younger, is this the right fit for me? And you need to be able to bounce it off someone else, like a neutral party, even when you're in it, and make sure that, yeah, you should stay, for me, I had nowhere to go. Where was I going to go? Everyone that I would have talked to about it was up the Nike chain all the way to Phil Knight. So like, who am I going to go to? So I really encourage people to make sure you have someone else that you can go to if you started to feel uncomfortable or question if it was the right place for you.
Yeah, it can be like a sanity check almost. Like I feel something's wrong. Impartial third person, third party who's not involved in this. Is this normal that this is happening? And yeah. Okay, that's good advice, because I think this is an interesting dynamic between coach and athlete, or agent and young like performer, artist, actor, whatever. This is like it's like the power dynamic is off. The power dynamic is always off, right? I mean, it happens in corporate too, but I just think that it's because in corporate you're not looking for a mentor till you are of a certain age. Usually you're like 25. Like, I mean, it's not to say that predatory behavior doesn't exist, but I think that at least you have a little bit more understanding of how the world works and what should and what shouldn't happen. In sports, you're just so damn young. You have no idea what's going on. Like, you really don't know what's going on. It's like you're just assuming that whatever happens this is the way it's supposed to be. And that's when people can take advantage, unfortunately. Okay. Last thing that I always like to ask, because, we started this conversation speaking about your book. When you look back at what you wrote and, all the information you put out there, and, you sort of put some more information that you're slightly hesitant to put out there, was there something that you still wish that you put in the book that you didn't?
That is good. Well, the original copy of the book was twice as long as it is, and the editor edited it down.
So you had a good editor too.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stories that I thought mattered that he didn't think mattered. And so I would love if all of those little stories had been in there, because I think it helps you see how I became who I am and what the tipping points were and things like that. Yeah. But I will say overall, he kept the stories that mattered the most. And
is there one story that you thought was...
I know people ask me this. There were so many little stories, right? About...
It's okay if the book was fine. I'm just curious.
No, I think there was nothing that when I read it, I was like, oh, I really wish that had still stayed. I felt like it still told the complete story. And so, no, I'm good with it.
Good. Yeah. You can do another one. You'll do another book. Okay.
More stories. Yeah.
All right. So if people want to connect with you, where should they go? Where do you want them to? Obviously, we'll put in the show notes, like the link to the book, Amazon, wherever you can buy your books, social, anything else that you want.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter and Threads and Instagram at Goucher. I do have a Facebook page, but I'll be honest, I never go there. But you can follow me there and see what I'm up to, and there's ways on there to get a hold of me if you need to. So
perfect. And then we kind of covered this a little bit, but I always like closing with this question. If you were going to go back and tell your 20-year-old self one lesson, what would that lesson be?
Honestly, it would just be something I used to tell myself when I was younger and wasn't having the success that I saw other people having. And I would just tell her, be patient, little lion, you're going to roar, and just have the patience. It's all going to pay off.